Chapter 71 Why Should I Surrender? You are listening at novelfull.audio. In Beihai, the darkest thing is you wearing the banner of justice. In the domed conference hall, the man's maniacal laughter continued to echo. We, the so-called giants of the underground world, the so-called giants of the dark forces, are all tools used by you, Rogers Darren, to control the North Sea. The muscles on his face twitched ferociously, and he yelled. You who hold high the banner of justice, are darker and more evil than all of us. Darren looked at the panting man quietly, his expression not affected at all by his words. He exhaled a dragon-like smoke from his mouth and said calmly. This world is what it is. This is the world of OnePiece. Anime is always beautiful, full of freedom, dreams, passion, friendship, youth, kindness and other beautiful elements. The adventures of the protagonist group are even more exciting and sound very happy, but in reality, deep in the so-called hot-blooded world, there is great cruelty and coldness hidden. Slaves are worse than dead, civilians are displaced, pirates are robbing without restraint, and the mafia is extremely rampant. The world's aristocrats, the celestial dragons, are aloof and possess godlike power, and can execute civilians at will. Pirates eulogize freedom and dreams, and the increase in bounties is actually something worth celebrating. The government is corrupt and greedy, and the aristocratic politicians live in a state of intoxication. The world government has ruled the world for 800 years and holds unimaginable terrible cards in its hands. As for the Navy, the Navy, which defends peace, is seen by many as a dog in the hands of the government. The so-called justice is pale and weak, separated from the perspective of the protagonist group. The world itself is a dark, bloody, and rotten world. Darren saw the nature of the world clearly early on. He cannot change the world for the time being, so he must be darker and more ruthless than anyone else. Hearing the Navy captain's blunt answer, the man was stunned for a moment. He was silent for a long time, gradually regained his composure, and suddenly said, in consideration of our long-term friendship, can you answer a question for me? Darren nodded and said, no problem. The man took a deep breath, stared at Darren, and asked in a deep voice. I want to know, after you deal with us old guys, who are you going to hand over the underground world of Beihai? Darren raised his head, stared directly at the chandelier on the dome, and said calmly. Don Quixote da Flamingo. The man was startled when he heard this, and then laughed. He let out a long breath. That's it, that's it. He slowly sat up straight, buttoned his cufflinks one by one, straightened his slightly messy peaked lapel suit, and smoothed his back. Let's do it. He said with a smile. Why should I surrender? Laugh. Extremely sharp threads whizzed across the void, and the three mafia members who were rushing over with long knives in front of them were cut off by lazy in an instant. Large amounts of intestines and internal organs mixed with hot blood were scattered on the ground. The faces of the three unlucky guys still had expressions of astonishment, and their pupils quickly became dilated. Doflamingo twitched his fingers, a few drops of blood splattered on his sunglasses. He moved on. The members of Don Quixote's family swarmed up from behind him, drew their long knives, and killed him like wolves into a flock of sheep, causing the streets to be filled with blood. Why should I surrender? Doflamingo looked at the bloody hell-like streets around him, watching the members of the Rodriguez family fall in front of him one after another. His eyes under his sunglasses were a little restless. 5 more people jumped from the roof of the building on the left, holding giant axes and slashing down at him from above. A heavy sound of breaking through the air came, and Doflamingo only curled his fingers. Those mafia members seemed to be imprisoned by something and could no longer control their bodies. What's this? I can't move my body. My hand. What are you doing? I'm sorry, this is not what I meant. I can't control my body. They let out waves of horrified exclamations with fear on their faces, and watched in disbelief as their bodies started to act without authorization and struck at their partners' heads. Laugh. The 5 people's weapons fell at the same time, and a shocking gap was opened in their foreheads by their partner's weapon. Blood spurted out again. They each twitched and slowly fell to the ground. The blood is getting thicker and thicker. I have the ability to control everyone's destiny. Doflamingo stepped forward with an indifferent expression. The power of the thread fruit was fully activated, and everything in front of him was cut and shattered by the sharp thread. I am a born king. I am a noble celestial dragon, and I am a descendant of the Creator. No matter who you are, you must kneel before me. This is the treatment I deserve. Anyone who looks at me must look at me with fear. Yes, I am right to think so. Why should I surrender? Laugh. Doflamingo waved his hand heavily, and dozens of strands of silk threads were sprayed out, twisting into a sharp whip that was tens of meters long, directly tearing an armory of the Rodriguez family in front of him to pieces. Boom. A huge explosion shot into the sky, and a dark mushroom cloud rose. Under the raging flames, the members of the Rodriguez family who had no time to escape turned into burning men in the sea of fire, letting out miserable wails. He said that the underworld in Beihai belongs to me. But even without him, I can easily unify the underground world in Beihai. I am destined to be the king of darkness. Why should I surrender? Figures kept falling down in front of them, and the hideous laughter of Torbol and others could be heard all around. The world was like purgatory. Maybe Torbol and the others were right. Doflamingo continued walking towards the grand mansion, leaving chaos and pain in his wake. A cruel smile gradually appeared at the corner of his mouth. There is nothing more pleasurable than appreciating the pain of others. His whole body began to tremble uncontrollably. Waves of irrepressible momentum erupted from his body, causing the flamingo's feathers to fly and dance. Dozens of gang members rolled their eyelids and fainted. Step by step, amid mournful wails and crazy laughter, Doflamingo advances step by step. Every step I take, the domineering aura in him became more and more uncontrollable and became more violent. The wind was raging and the sky was changing. Why should I surrender? The Rodriguez family is just the first step. I won't stay in a small place like the North Sea forever. The Grand Line, the New World, that is the stage where Don Quixote Doflamingo can truly show off my talents. The sea belongs to heroes, lords and overlords. The shouts of death and wailing gradually became weaker. Doflamingo stopped. He stood in front of a luxurious and extravagant mansion. The villa of Rodriguez Michael, the tycoon of the North Sea underworld and the patriarch of the Rodriguez family. Unknowingly, Torbol and the others, who were filled with the smell of blood, as well as hundreds of Don Quixote family members, had gathered behind him. They looked at Doflamingo's back with adoration and fanaticism. That arrogant back. Doflamingo looked at the door of the dome villa, and his sinister smile became even stronger. Yes, no one can stop me from rising. Nobody. So why should I surrender? Doflamingo thought to himself. Then, he took a deep breath. His eyes were cruel and cold, strode forward, and pushed open the door. Squeaky, the heavy bronze door slowly opened, making a dull friction sound. The smile on Doflamingo's lips suddenly froze. Ask for everything and be grateful. Chapter 72. Thank you, Godfather. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Squeaky, the door of the classical-style luxury villa slowly opened. The cold and biting wind surged out from behind the thick bronze door and rushed towards the face. It suddenly submerged Doflamingo's figure and caused the pink feather coat behind him to fly up. The whole world seemed to stop at this moment. It was as if something invisible was broken in the air. Dead silence suddenly fell. The originally menacing Torbol IV, and the hundreds of Don Quixote family members behind them holding blood-stained swords, instantly held their breath and did not dare to move. They stared blankly at the scene in the hall of the villa, grunting and swallowing their saliva, and a thin layer of cold sweat gradually formed on their foreheads. The originally chaotic and noisy world became silent. Tick-tock, tick-tock, the sound of some kind of liquid dripping to the ground resounded in the silent world, stirring everyone's extremely nervous heart. They saw this picture. Flames burn in ancient fireplaces in the domed hall, the beating light and shadow intertwine with each other, overtly or covertly outlining the outline of the hall. A mottled oval conference table with traces of time is placed in the center of the hall. The intricately carved stained glass windows on the walls on both sides shine dimly, and there are oil paintings full of religious atmosphere on the circular dome. A man hangs on the black wall above the fireplace. To be precise, there was a corpse hanging. He had a neat slicked back hair and wore a mafia-style suit with a lapel collar. There was a blood-red rose on his chest, and his head hung down weakly. A gleaming metal spear penetrated deeply into his heart, penetrated his body, and nailed his entire body to the wall. The blood from the wound continued to flow down his suit, trousers, and leather shoes, dripping to the ground, forming the ticking sound they heard. They suddenly recognized the identity of the body. This is the ultimate goal of their profession. The head of the Rodriguez family, the Underworld tycoon who controls 1/3 of the illegal industry in Beihai, Rodriguez Michael, and now, he is dead, like some kind of religious and mysterious ritual, hanging on the wall, on his lowered head, the pair of empty pupils stared directly at all of them. The slightly raised corners of his mouth seemed to be showing them a mocking smile, Torbol and the others suddenly felt their whole bodies tremble, and their pores stood up. They subconsciously moved their gazes to somewhere in the hall. In the dim hall with flickering firelight, there was a man sitting at the main seat of the conference round table. The firelight could dispel the darkness, but it could not illuminate the man's face. His face seemed to be forever hidden in shadow. As long as he doesn't take the initiative to expose himself, the world will never discover him, Torbol and the others could barely see the outline of his figure. A crisp black suit, a white shirt, a cool black tie, and black military boots. He sat there with his legs crossed, his fingers holding a cigar gently tapping the conference table, and his sharp and deep eyes looking at them casually in the darkness. He is smiling, although they couldn't see clearly. This thought came to all of Torbol's minds. It came just in time. Darren spoke slowly, breaking the silence. Light and shadow flowed, and the firelight finally illuminated his face. He was indeed smiling. Well done. He looked at the young figure of the flamingo with praise. Flamingo was silent, dead silence. Torbol and others could clearly see that his fists were clenched tightly, trembling, and clenched tightly. They could only see Flamingo's back, but they could guess that their young master's face was absolutely ugly at this time. At this time, a whistling sound of a telephone bug suddenly sounded. Buru bulu, buru bulu. Darren took out the military phone bug from his arms and connected the signal. It's me. A deep voice slowly came from the phone bug. Report to Commander Darren Base. As of 5 minutes ago, all our operations have ended. 17 well-known underworld forces, including the Snooker, Vincent and Rockefeller families, have all been eliminated under the light of justice. As soon as these words came out, everyone in the Don Quixote family suddenly took a breath of cold air. The underground world of Beihai was all suppressed by the Navy. Unprecedented fear instantly flooded into their brains, making their faces turn extremely pale. The Beihai Navy carried out a bloody cleansing of the underground world, and now the top officer of the Beihai Navy was standing in front of them, plus the body of the head of the Rodriguez family. Everyone shuddered. Could it be that the Don Quixote family is also the target of the Navy's purge? Well, I know, you did a good job. I'm very satisfied. Darren replied to the phone bug. Let's start returning. I still have a few things to deal with here, and I will go back soon. Yes, Mr. Base Commander. Military phone bug communications disrupted. Putting away the phone bug, Darren took a puff of his cigar and slowly stood up from the main seat. Following his casual action, thousands of people in the Don Quixote family all took a step back. Only one person didn't move. Flamingo still stood there, remaining silent. His clenched fists were shaking even more. I don't know what violent impulse I am restraining. Darren walked towards him step by step. The expressions of several people in Torbol changed slightly. Just when they were about to make a move, the Navy captain's inadvertent look made them feel as if they had fallen into an ice cellar, and they immediately did not dare to move. With the sound of military boots scraping the ground, Darren finally walked in front of Flamingo. He looked down condescendingly at the blonde kid in front of him who gritted his teeth and had a gloomy expression, and smiled. This is my gift to you, Dover. His tone was very kind, as if an elder cared about his doting junior. From this moment on, the underground world of Beihai is yours. He narrowed his eyes, smiled and stretched out his hand, quietly waiting for Flamingo's response. How do you like it? 0.1 second, 0.2 seconds, 0.3 seconds. Everyone in Torbol looked at the motionless back of their young master, their hearts beating rapidly and their brows sweating profusely. Why surrender? Why should I surrender? At some point, Flamingo's clenched fist suddenly stopped shaking. He unclenched his fist. Torbol and the others seemed to hear a silent sigh. Then their eyes widened. They saw, their arrogant young master slowly showed a smile on his face and took a step forward. Gently hold the Navy's hand, bow slightly, kiss the back of his hand respectfully. Thank you, my godfather. Thank you, my godfather. Ask for everything. Thank you very much. Chapter 73 Beihai, Only Black and White. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What is the most important thing about raising a wild wolf? Is it to inspire its hatred for the celestial dragons and the world government, and to cultivate its thirst for blood? Should we allow it to kill unruly and maintain its ferocity? Or give it a clear enough target to train its hunting abilities? All of the above, but not quite. The most important thing when raising a wild wolf is to completely dominate it and torture it constantly, so that this posture of submission is deeply engraved in the depths of its brain like a mark, becoming a habit and instinct. Let it always remember who is its true owner. That's the most important thing. Looking at the Draco boy in front of him who bent down to kiss the back of his hand, Darren smiled with satisfaction. Very good, he is indeed my godson. He rubbed Doflamingo's short golden hair affectionately, let him stand beside him, and took his hand step by step out of the domed hall where blood was everywhere, outside the old villa, seeing their arrogant and rebellious young master being pulled out by the black-haired marine like a real child. Everyone in the menacing Don Quixote family was shocked and froze in place. Like falling into a dream. Dover, are these your subordinates? Darren smiled and glanced casually at the thousands of mafia members present. Doflamingo lowered his head and replied. Yes, Godfather. Darren nodded and smiled. Very good. They are considered elite in Beihai. There's just something wrong. Doflamingo whispered. Godfather, what do you mean? Darren's lips curled up into a sneer. You are my godson and a born king. You must remember one thing. His eyes flashed. Except for me, anyone who sees you must kneel down and bow. As soon as the words fell, a majestic aura like an abyss and a mountain erupted from the body of the naval colonel, spurting out indiscriminately and spreading in all directions. The world seemed to have fallen into deathly silence at this moment, and all the colors quickly faded away, leaving only black and white. The wind is strong and the wind is blowing. All the members of the Don Quixote family, headed by the four cadres Torbol, Diamante, Virgo, and Pica, were struck by this abyss-like aura, and their pupils trembled violently. They felt the power in their bodies fade away silently, their minds went blank, their knees bent, and they fell to the ground as if they were out of strength. Ding 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 ding. Countless weapons fell from their hands, falling to the ground like dense raindrops, making crisp sounds one after another. The four of Torbol knelt on one knee, gritting their teeth, their faces extremely pale. They looked at the domineering Admiral Beihai with horrified faces, and an unbelievable thought suddenly came to their minds. This strong impact from the soul is like the shock of facing thousands of troops and the roar of the sea. This man's courage has become significantly stronger than last time. The changes in the world seem to sweep across the entire North Sea. At this moment, there are only two people left standing in the world. Standing next to Darren, Doflamingo gritted his teeth tightly, his eyes filled with dense bloodshot eyes, his expression changing, as if he was suppressing something. The domineering spirit in my heart is ready to move, but it is obviously suppressed. Dover, I'll wait for you at the Grand Channel. Darren turned his head and narrowed his eyes at his godson, smiling. The flawless white cloak roared and danced unbridled behind him, and the shadow it raised completely enveloped the figure of the blond boy. Doflamingo lowered his head, with suppressed ambition and coldness hidden deep in his bloodshot eyes, and said respectfully. Yes, Godfather. In September of the year 1492, under the orders of Rogers Darren, the Supreme Commander of the North Sea Navy and North Sea Admiral, the North Sea Navy fleet carried out a bloody suppression and purge of more than 20 well-known mafia families in the North Sea. This action completely ended the chaos that had been rampant among underground forces in the North Sea for decades or even centuries. Within a week of this action, the Don Quixote family, headed by Doflamingo, effortlessly took over the entire underground world of the North Sea. Their power continued to expand, and soon thereafter they developed into an insurmountable force. An underestimated behemoth. Its industries cover arms smuggling, customs, gambling, espionage, intelligence sales and other industries, and its tentacles even extend to other sea areas and even the Great Waterway. Beihai also began to spread a saying, the world is colorful, but in the North Sea, there is only black and white. Since then, the world has recognized the chaos of the North Sea and entered a stable and peaceful order. You are really a lunatic. You let yourself have such freedom. Aren't you afraid that one day you will be unable to curb Doflamingo's ambition and you will be stabbed in the back by him? Beihai 321 Naval Branch, Base Commander's Office. Flying Squirrel flipped through the intelligence documents in his hand and looked helplessly at his boss, who was sitting there smoking a cigar leisurely. He had a headache. The document in hand clearly shows the news caused by the Quixote family's annexation of major mafia properties in recent days, the scale of the industry, the number of people, the countries and towns involved. All kinds of information are clearly listed. He didn't dare. Darren replied casually, looking through the floor-to-ceiling glass to the other side of the sea. The Flying Squirrel frowned. Are you sure? That kid doesn't seem to be a law-abiding person. Darren slowly came back to his senses, looked at the Flying Squirrel, and said with a smile. It's precisely because I know he won't keep to himself that I feel relieved. The truly dangerous enemies are often not such ambitious brats, but those seemingly inconspicuous guys who hide their conspiracies in their hearts. Doflamingo is a very talented guy. I need him to help me stabilize the situation in Beihai. The greater his power, the more benefits it will bring to us. With his identity as a celestial dragon as a barrier, the Navy headquarters, no, even the world government will be wary of interfering in Beihai's affairs. The Flying Squirrel muttered. Of course I understand this, but I have seen that guy, and I can tell that the way he looks at you is wrong. What I'm worried about is that after you leave Beihai, will he? Darren waved his hand to interrupt the Flying Squirrel, and instead asked a seemingly irrelevant question. Do you know the spirit of a king? It is said that only millions of people can give birth to one person's aura. Is it the domineering aura of a king? That's right. Darren smiled and said. Doflamingo is the awakened one with overlord color and domineering energy. This is why I chose him. There seemed to be some deep meaning in his eyes. Strength in strength, speed in speed, size in power, status, are all secondary. In this ocean, what really determines the final outcome, is courage. As long as my domineering power is stronger than his, he will never dare to rebel against me. Ask for everything, thank you very much. Chapter 74 The Shortcut to Awakening the Overlord's Domineering Energy. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Overlord Color and Domineering. The Flying Squirrel murmured to himself, but he quickly reacted and stared at the boss with his legs crossed and smoking in disbelief. Wait. You have awakened the Overlord Color Hockey. Darren glanced at him and smiled. Yes, during the battle with Doflamingo on Rubeck Island, he ordered Flying Squirrel to lead the Navy to directly block the island, evacuate civilians, and set up a cordon. When he and Doflamingo collided with each other's domineering aura, Flying Squirrel was still busy giving orders, so he didn't know. When did this happen? The Flying Squirrel gasped, confused. He had heard about the rareness of overlord color and dominance. In the North Sea, even the previous North Sea Admiral, Sakaski, who was known as the Monster, had not successfully awakened. Perhaps in the Great Channel or the New World, many strong men have awakened the Overlord Hockey, but those are basically the famous strong men among pirates, for example, the great pirate Whitebeard, and the mysterious Roger. However, in the Navy, there are very few people who can awaken the Overlord's domineering energy. As a violent law enforcement agency under the world government, the Navy focuses on hierarchical discipline and obedience. There is simply not enough space and soil for free will to arise, not to mention the fact that there are towering beings like the world's nobles, the celestial dragons, above their heads. Under such conditions, if a Navy wants to awaken the king's spirit, it is as difficult as climbing to the sky. As far as Flying Squirrel knows, the only ones in the Navy who have awakened their overlord color domineering spirit are the current Navy Marshal Cyborg Sora, Navy Headquarters Admiral Buddha Sengoku, and the strongest Marine Lieutenant General Garp, who is known as a hero. But now Darren actually told himself that he had successfully awakened the domineering energy. Does this mean that this guy is more talented than the so-called monsters Sakaski and Porcellino? If he hadn't understood Darren's character, Flying Squirrel would have thought that he was deceiving him. Say when. Darren blew out a stream of smoke and said with a half-smile. It's probably when Shield Saint was attacked by a Neptune-like creature and unfortunately died, probably. Well, if you also want to awaken your domineering energy, I have a good way. A bad premonition welled up in the flying squirrel's heart, but he still had the courage to ask. What? Darren flipped a coin, the coin suddenly melted and twisted into a gleaming dagger in mid-air, the sharp tip of the knife is vertical to the ground and pointed straight into the sky. Kill a celestial dragon. He said lightly, flying squirrel, the corners of his mouth twitched, and several black lines appeared on his forehead. Are you serious? Darren shrugged and said. Who knows, this is just my guess, but I guess there is a high probability that it will be useful. The effect of this method may not be too obvious for pirates. After all, they are lawless guys, but for the Navy, it will definitely have an extremely drastic impact on their personal will. The so-called overlord color and domineering energy, based on my personal experience and understanding, is ultimately the external manifestation of personal will and courage. Generally speaking, it will awaken in extreme states. This extreme state does not refer to physical danger. After all, as a Navy, we take great risks whenever we go on missions. The so-called extreme state refers to the spiritual one. As a Navy, from the day we put on our uniforms, we have been trained and educated to obey orders and maintain world peace and justice, but in fact everyone knows very well, that is just a lie. We may be defending justice, but deep down we all know that our tasks and actions are, to a greater extent, to maintain the rule of the world government. And the top of the world government is the celestial dragon who sits high in the clouds and calls himself a god. Darren's voice gradually became lower, his deep eyes flashed with an inexplicable light, and he said with a smile. For a Navy, what is more exciting than killing the god who is above us and gives us orders? How about it, do you want to try the feeling of killing gods? Watch the ugly faces of the celestial dragons wailing in front of you, witness them kneeling in front of you begging for mercy, and let the noble and great descendants of the Creator have nothing to do. Posture and dignity. Aren't you curious about that feeling? The flying squirrel looked at Darren's half-smiling gaze, shuddered all over, and subconsciously took a step back. Ha 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 ha. Seeing the flying squirrel take a step back, Darren couldn't help laughing. The flying squirrel rolled his eyes angrily. You bastard, don't tempt me, you are such a devil. No wonder that brat Doflamingo was eaten to death by you. Sometimes I start to wonder if your devil fruit has some ability to confuse people. What he had to admit was that the flying squirrel actually found that he had been attracted to Darren's proposal for a moment. However, as soon as this thought came to his mind, a chill ran through his body and the pores on his back stood up, the dagger in midair returned to the shape of a coin. The lines, numbers, and patterns on it were exactly the same as before, without any changes, and were extremely delicate. Darren caught the coin falling in midair, placed it gently on the desk, and said with a smile. That ability may exist, but in the end, the so-called human heart is actually very simple. Every human being, whether a high-ranking person or a humble commoner, has weaknesses and desires. Money, wealth, power, status, fame, beauty, gambling, cigarettes, wine. There are many ways to kill a person, and violence is the simplest and most direct way. But if you want to destroy a person's will, you must find his weakness. The desire for destruction is a weakness shared by most people. Don't be surprised. Our Navy's duty is of course to protect, but the Navy is also a human being, and humans also have desires. Facing something magnificent and extremely beautiful, you will immediately have the urge to worship, pity and protect, but deep down in your heart you will also have a twisted desire for destruction. How would it feel if I destroyed such a beautiful thing with my own hands? We often have similar thoughts. That's why there are love stories in the world, where people are brutally killed when they love someone they can't get. And what is the most sacred, beautiful, noble, and greatest thing in the world? Of course it's the world government, it's the dragon people. Perhaps one day, when people in this world look at the behemoth that has ruled the world for 800 years, their originally fearful eyes will change slightly. How wonderful will that picture be? Ask for everything and be grateful, I'm still ill and can only maintain normal updates, sorry. Chapter 75 Encirclement and Suppression. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You are really a madman. When the flying squirrel heard Darren's shocking words, he couldn't help but smile bitterly and said. Are you sure I can hear these words? Darren smiled and said. Why not? From that day when you said you wanted to go with me, I saw that you had such potential. The long history and brainwashing of the world government has divided the sea into 3, 6, and 9 levels. The celestial dragons are superior and control everything. However, with the changes of the times and the rise of heroes, this inherent concept will inevitably undergo great changes. He slowly leaned back on the chair, picked up the wine glass and took a sip with an elegant posture. Of course, this is just a guess on my part. To be further sure, more examples and data are needed to support it. The flying squirrel looked at Darren's half-smiling eyes and felt uncomfortable all over his body. The corner of his mouth twitched and said. Are you trying to use me as a guinea pig? Darren smiled and said. Your name is Flying Squirrel, isn't it? Flying Squirrel. Darren looked at the flying squirrel's expression as if it had eaten shit, and smiled even more cheerfully. After a while, he stopped his smile and said slowly. Actually, it's not entirely a joke. I don't trust Beihai if it is left to someone else. After I leave the North Sea and go to Marineland, this sea area will be left to you, Flying Squirrel. The expression on his face became serious. Although Doflamingo seems to have become more obedient after being beaten, he is still an ambitious guy after all. The card of Germa can continue to be used. Then you can specifically provoke conflicts between the two families. Our Beihai Navy only acts as a mediator in the middle. There is not much need. There are still few dramas for the dealer to personally end the game. A little bit is better, otherwise the players will have to fold. But tactics and means are only one aspect after all. The most important thing is strength. The flying squirrel nodded deeply and said in a deep voice. Don't worry, I will never be lazy in my practice. Darren nodded upon hearing this. At this time, a rush of phone calls suddenly sounded. Buru buru, buru bulu. Darren and Flying Squirrel were both stunned at the same time, and both looked at the military phone bug on the desk. I'm Darren. Darren reached out to connect the signal and said in a deep voice. Darren, it's me. The serious voice of the Warring States General came out from the military phone bug, showing a solemn tone. Warring States General, what happened? Darren frowned, looked at each other and exchanged glances with the Flying Squirrel. According to the intelligence they knew, Sengoku should be uniting with the CP members of the world government at this time to hunt down and defeat the world destroyer Bundy Waldo. There is a problem with the crusade against Bundy Waldo. Because of the increase in bounty, Bundy Waldo has increased his vigilance. The reinforcements from the headquarters have completely blocked the only route from the North Sea to the Great Channel. But Bundy Waldo has completely blocked the only route from the North Sea to the Great Channel. D. Valdo and his men are hiding in the North Sea. On the other side of the phone, Singua's eyebrows were twisted together as if someone had filled them in with a black pen. Darren, I know that you have been operating in the North Sea for many years and have a certain say and influence in this sea area. This time I need to use your connections in the North Sea to find out where Bundy Waldo is hiding. Darren raised his eyebrows after hearing what Singua said. Since taking the blame of Shield Saint, the Navy has increased the bounty on world destroyer Bundy Waldo from the original 200 million Baileys to 400 million Baileys, but I didn't expect that this guy would actually become cautious because of this. This was something I didn't expect. Darren thought for a moment and said slowly. General Warring States, use the power of the North Sea Fleet and my connections. This is not a problem. But what I want to know is, have you taken action against Bundy Waldo again? Are you assessing the extent of his possible counterattack? Senguo was worthy of being a wise general and instantly realized the purpose of Darren's question. Yes, General Sengoku. If Bundy Waldo is injured, he is likely to take drastic revenge. Darren pondered and said. I'm not just talking about our navy, but also civilians. Warring States was silent for a moment and said slowly. I did fight with him several times during this period, he was injured. Darren smiled with satisfaction. I understand, General Sengoku, I will arrange for manpower to search and track Bundy Waldo's whereabouts as soon as possible. That I can't miss the meritorious service delivered to my door, the North Sea has been completely blocked. With the navigation technology of this era, it is impossible for Bundy Waldo to cross the windless zone and enter the New World. This also means that this is a game of catching a turtle in a jar. The legendary great pirate was as powerful as Whitebeard and Roger. Of course, Darren wanted to see for himself how far away he was from such an existence. At the same time, North Sea, Robeck Island, port, a dilapidated pirate ship with traces of war on its surface slowly sailed into the port. On the bow of the ship, a tall and powerful figure stood with his arms folded. He wore a horned helmet, had a gray-green beard, and had a pair of dark green eyes with a turbid and sinister look. Bundy Waldo, there was a bloody bandage on his chest. It's really a boat in the gutter, that damn yellow-skinned monkey. Bundy Waldo raised his hand and pressed the bloody bandage on his chest. At that location, although the wound hit by the laser beam had stopped bleeding, it still hurt slightly. No one expected that the tall rear admiral would be even more vulgar than his appearance. While he was fighting with warring states, he suddenly made a sneak attack. Waldo, are your injuries okay? At this time, an old little man walked up with difficulty. He still had a sling bottle on his arm, his expression was sluggish, and his skin was wrinkled. Bin Jack, the vice captain of the Wald Pirates, is also the group's think tank, similar to Wald's brother. Don't worry, brother, I'm fine. Bundy Waldo actually smiled honestly when facing his brother. He has been dependent on his brother since he was a child, and he has always wanted to go around the world and have a great adventure. Bin Jack glanced at Bundy Waldo with some worry, opened his mouth, but finally said nothing. So brother, are you sure that the largest underground world agency in the North Sea is on this island? That guy named Doflamingo. Bundy Waldo raised his head, squinted his eyes and looked at the bustling islands and ports in front of him, and said sadly. Bin Jack nodded and said in a weak voice. Yes, the Don Quixote family is already the largest mafia force in the North Sea. According to the intelligence we have collected, their scope of influence is so large and their methods are so rampant. Even the Beihai Navy has to stay away from them. It's just Waldo, are you sure you want to do this? We can still turn back now. Bundy Waldo burst out laughing. Brother, our dream of traveling around the world has not come true yet. How could the great adventure of the Ward Pirates end in this mere North Sea? That he waved his hand suddenly, his momentum rising. Go and find that kid named Doflamingo. We will get the power to destroy the Navy from his hands. That I have been suffering from high fever for many days and have been fucked in the hospital. I am sorry that the update has been affected. Chapter 76 The King of the Underworld. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Finally, discharged from the hospital, Robeck Island, the residence of the Don Quixote family, in the magnificent resident hall, the cool breeze blew the curtains on the windowsill, causing them to ripple and wrinkle, the open glass windows creaked in the wind, and dust danced in the sunlight. On the spacious and soft leather sofa, Doflamingo, wearing a white shirt, leaned back on the sofa, his head tilted back, and a book covered his face. No. Doflamingo, who was sleeping soundly, suddenly started to tremble violently. He suddenly opened his eyes, bent over and gasped for breath, and a thin layer of cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He was breathing heavily, and his eyes were bloodshot under his sunglasses. He suddenly picked up the red wine on the coffee table next to him and drank it hard. Gulu gulu. The wine as red as blood slid down his neck, staining his white shirt red, but he didn't pay attention. Dover. Toribol and the others walked in at some unknown time, looking at Doflamingo who was lighting a cigar shakily, with worries in his eyes. I'm fine. After taking a few puffs of his cigar, Doflamingo managed to calm down and waved his hands. Same dream, the burning city wall, the scolding of the untouchables, the father's cry, and the burning pain. How is our business lately? Compared with the arrogance and immaturity when he first came to Beihai, Doflamingo's brows at this time were a little less domineering and a little more vicious and mature. His body has also grown 10 centimeters taller, his face is stern, and his short golden hair has been grown a little longer and combed back into a neat back. He already looks like the cold and arrogant temperament of the king of the dark world. Speaking of business, Torbol swings his cane enthusiastically, with sticky mucus dragging under his nostrils, and dances. I said. After this period of cleaning up, our Don Quixote family has collected most of the underground industries in Beihai. We are now, the well-deserved kings of the underground world in Beihai. Diamante on the side also said excitedly. All this has come so easily. No one can stop our rise. If we continue to develop at this rate, our industry and business will be able to reach the Great Channel in less than a year. Pika laughed sharply. Those arrogant and domineering kings and nobles in the North Sea are like lapdogs begging for mercy from us. Dover, you should see their faces, ha 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 ha. You will definitely enjoy that scene. Listening to the smiles and expressions of confidence in the future of the core cadres he regarded as family members, Doflamingo's inner haze also dissipated a lot. He licked his chapped lips and said with an evil smile. The North Sea is just the first step for us to conquer this sea. When we have enough primitive accumulation, we will leave this place. I have a feeling that a new era is coming soon. As he spoke, Doflamingo clenched his fists, and a strange cold light flashed under his cold sunglasses. A looming majestic momentum emanated from his body, causing the pink feather coat he wore to automatically move without wind. When Torbol and others saw this scene, they looked at Doflamingo with undisguised admiration and enthusiasm. Originally, they were worried that when their young master surrendered to that navy, Doflamingo would lose his majesty as a king, but now it seems that the great young master has not been depressed by this. His momentum has even become stronger than before. But young master, are the taxes collected by the Beihai Navy too much? Virgo, who had been silent at this time, suddenly said in a muffled voice. We have raised so many people in Beihai and run such a huge industry, but in the end more than 50% of the profits have to be handed over to the Beihai Navy. Before he could finish speaking, Doflamingo glanced at him coldly and interrupted. There is some money that we cannot make. Without the protection of the Navy, our business would not be going so smoothly. Cigar smoke filled his face, making him look gloomy. Wait a little longer, that guy Darren can't stay in Beihai forever. A rebellious sneer gradually appeared at the corner of Doflamingo's mouth. He thought he could control me tightly, but sometimes people are negligent. Hearing the words of their young master, Torbol and others all showed treacherous smiles in unison. This is their wise and sacred young master, it is absolutely impossible to surrender to others. But at this moment, a sudden change occurred. Boom! The family meeting hall suddenly seemed to be hit by a meteorite falling from the sky. With a huge roar, the solid walls suddenly shattered and collapsed, dragon-like dust and rocks were stirred up in the storm, and the roaring air waves directly flew Torbol and the others away, slamming into the ruins and vomiting blood. Ha 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 ha. Where is that brat Doflamingo? Come out and see me. An unruly, hoarse and ferocious laughter sounded. The disgraced Torbol and the others looked at the burly figure wearing a horned helmet and slowly walking out of the smoke with disbelief on their faces, and their pupils trembled violently. Who are you? How dare you break into the Don Quixote family's residence? You are looking for death. Several roars sounded at the same time, and everyone in Torbol jumped up towards the figure angrily, using their own attack methods, but in the next second, they couldn't even see the man's movements clearly. They only felt their eyes blurred. The whole person felt like being hit by a high-speed train, and his body flew backwards like a cannonball. Rumble, thick, solid walls were knocked down by them, collapsing, sending up huge amounts of smoke and dust. Whoosh! At this time, an extremely sharp explosion suddenly exploded into waves in the air. Laugh. The extremely sharp thread shot out from Doflamingo's hands, easily cutting through the rocks and the ground, and slashed fiercely towards the burly figure. It was Doflamingo who took action. However, an incredible scene occurred. There was only a clang sound, like gold and iron colliding, and the sharp silk thread cut into the man's chest, and a long and bright spark bloomed. Doflamingo's pupils shrank, and he clearly saw that the man's upper body was covered with a layer of black and shiny invisible armor, reflecting a faint cold light. Armed and domineering, that he didn't have time to exclaim, and the guy had already disappeared from his sight. Boom. There was a dull sound, and a heavy fist slammed into Doflamingo's abdomen, causing his body to bend, his eyeballs to protrude from his sockets, and his mouth to open. A big hand grabbed his golden hair and pulled his head up. A rough, cold and cruel face came into view. "You are Doflamingo, right?" Bundy Waldo looked down at the blonde kid in front of him with blood bleeding from the corner of his mouth, and sneered. "I heard that the entire arms smuggling in the North Sea is your industry." After nearly 10 days of high fever, hanging bottles, and lying on the body, I was finally discharged from the hospital, crying loudly. I will adjust the status today and resume normal updates tomorrow. I ask for your support, thank you very much. Chapter 77. Do you want to blow up the world? You are listening at novelfull.audio. So what? The blonde hair was almost torn off from his scalp, but the severe pain aroused Doflamingo's ferocity, and his bloodshot pupils shot out with fierce ferocity. The 5 fingers of his right hand were curved like sharp claws. Doflamingo raised his hand from bottom to top, and the silk thread as sharp as a sword cut through the ground with a chi sound and swept towards Bundy Waldo's crotch. Unexpectedly, Bundy Waldo's lips raised a sarcastic sneer. He didn't hide away. When his body sank, he raised his legs and bent his knees. The domineering calves wrapped in dark armed colors hit the transparent silk thread in the air. Laugh. A large area of sparks bloomed brightly, and Bundy Waldo did not hesitate in his movements. He rushed forward like an arrow, and his huge shiny black fist slammed into Doflamingo's throat with great force. Wow! Doflamingo's throat felt as if he had been hit hard, and a pool of blood spat out from his open mouth, and 2 of his broken teeth flew up. Damn guy. I'm Doflamingo. His throat was injured, and Doflamingo's crazy roar was hoarse as if it was burned by fire, but his eyes were full of ferocity, and he roared unruly, his eyes emitting unexplained fierceness and anger. Veins popped out on his crooked fingers, and he flicked them hard. The 5 forked threads of the leaf rake shot up at such a close distance and penetrated towards Bundy Waldo's throat. Lower the rogue line. This kid's reaction is pretty good. Bundy Waldo's eyes were focused, and a subtle and strange red light flashed in the depths of his pupils. Almost instinctively, he tilted his head slightly, and the transparent silk thread that could penetrate steel brushed past his cheek, leaving a shallow blood stain from his cheek to his neck. Doflamingo was obviously stunned for a moment when he saw this scene. When he reacted the next moment, the burly figure in front of him had disappeared. You kid is quite interesting. You are indeed qualified to be the king of the underground world in Beihai. Rough and wild laughter rang in his ears, and the sound of bursting through the air was approaching infinitely. Boom. Crackling, a fist hit Doflamingo's chest like a meteorite, and bursts of bone-cracking sound suddenly erupted that made Torbol and others' scalps numb. Bundy Waldo shouted loudly, boom. Accompanied by the second burst of armed domineering, the overwhelming and desperate impact force was wildly vented on the body of the blonde boy, and large clumps of blurry blood exploded on his body surface, blowing the high end. His white shirt was stained blood red. The ground within 100 meters below the feet suddenly cracked and dismembered. With a deafening roar, the entire Don Quixote family residence collapsed under the impact of the energy derived from this punch. In the billowing dust, Doflamingo groaned, his tightly contracted pupils trembling, his legs weakened, and he knelt on the ground limply. He covered his abdomen with both hands, gasping for breath like a fish starved of oxygen. An unprecedented haze covered his eyes, the crushing gap. This guy's strength is so powerful that it makes people despair. Okay, it's almost time to play. Bundy Waldo casually glanced at the surrounding garrison hall that was in ruins, and casually picked up a bottle of wine that was rarely intact from the broken remains of the coffee table next to it. He pulled out the cork of the bottle, raised his head and took 2 sips, wiped his lips roughly, and grinned. Kid, you should have heard of my name. This time I came to visit you to discuss a business deal with you. Business? Is this how you talk about business? Doflamingo panted for a while before regaining his breath, and raised his head with difficulty, his face pale. He raised his hand to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth, stared at the powerful pirate in front of him, and said coldly. Thief, ha ha ha. Otherwise? I am a pirate. I am not you yellow-haired brats who like to play house. Bundy Waldo laughed wildly. Is it possible that I should pay a courtesy visit and then shake hands and chat? Kid. I'm not talking nonsense. Since the Don Quixote family you lead controls the underground arms smuggling business in the entire North Sea, I will speak directly. He rubbed the wound on his chest that was covered with blood-stained bandages, and a cruel and sinister smile slowly appeared on his face. I need arms, a lot of arms, and a cannon of unprecedented scale. A massive heavy artillery piece. Doflamingo's pupils shrank when he heard this. Relevant information about the wild guy in front of him quickly emerged in his mind. World Destroyer Bundy Waldo, the latest bounty of 400 million Baileys, the legendary pirate, the Momo fruit power user, his devil fruit ability can multiply the size and speed of foreign objects dozens or even hundreds of times. Even the simplest flintlock gun in his hands can exert terrifying power that far exceeds the heavy artillery of a naval warship. With such terrifying abilities, he blew up towns and naval ships one after another, unscrupulously destroying everything that stood in his way, and now, this guy actually wants to build a cannon of unprecedented scale. A cannon of that size, if it were enhanced by Bondi Valdemomo's fruit power, its power would be enough to wipe out a small island in an instant. Do you want to blow up the Navy headquarters? Or the Holy Land Marie Joa? Looking at Bundy Waldo's twisted and crazy expression, Doflamingo felt a chill coming down his spine and couldn't help but ask. That's none of your business, Dover kid. Bundy Waldo sneered. You just need to help me build it. For other things, I advise you not to interfere too much. Doflamingo raised his eyebrows and was about to speak. Boom. Bundy Waldo directly raised his boot and stepped hard on his head, crushing his entire face into the ground suddenly shattered, causing dense cracks. Doflamingo's eyes suddenly became bloodshot and he gritted his teeth. Do you understand, Dover kid? Bundy Waldo sneered, stepping on Doflamingo's head with his foot, which shattered the ground inch by inch. Of course, I still know the rules of doing business. Business cannot let you lose money. Your life is the income from this business. He sneered. You have 3 days. The moment he finished speaking, Doflamingo felt his head relax. He suddenly raised his head. Bundy Waldo's figure has disappeared without a trace, and all that is left in sight is the dilapidated family residence, and the blood seeping from his forehead, staining his vision red. Damn! Doflamingo was stunned for a while, then suddenly roared like a beast. His hands were firmly clasped into the ground, his expression violent and twisted, the ferocious green veins bulged on his forehead like earthworms, looking extremely terrifying. Dover. Torbol and the others walked over cautiously, dragging their seriously injured bodies. They looked at Doflamingo's uncertain face and did not dare to breathe loudly. Beihai. At a certain moment, Doflamingo suddenly laughed maniacally. He laughed so wildly, his whole body twitched with laughter, and he burst into tears. Interesting. Interesting. So interesting. Doflamingo slowly took out a phone bug from his arms, his sunglasses reflecting a sinister light. It was a military phone bug. He thought he would never call this phone bug in his life, but he was wrong. Buru bulu, buru bulu. The call of the telephone bug sounded so harsh in the dead silence of the ruins. Sunlight casts down from the ruined dome, and dust flies around the blond boy. Blue. It's me. A deep voice came out. Doflamingo knelt there and was silent for a long time. Godfather, Bundy Waldo is here for me. He lowered his head and said, ask for everything, thank you very much. Chapter 78 Baptism Ceremony. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Godfather, Bundy Waldo is here for me. Darren listened to the voice coming from the military phone bug with some astonishment, and his expression while smoking his cigar became weird little by little. I had just received an order from the Warring States period to trace the whereabouts of Bundy Waldo. Within 2 minutes, the guy actively approached his godson. The flying squirrel sitting across from the desk also listened to Doflamingo's words with a confused expression, and the corners of his mouth twitched. It took me almost getting my mouth burned by the cigar to react suddenly. Darren and Flying Squirrel couldn't help but look at each other, and for a moment they felt like it was easy. What does he want? Darren slowly exhaled a stream of smoke, and his brain started working quickly. He needs munitions, large quantities of munitions. Doflamingo gritted his teeth and said. That guy is crazy. He almost razed the station on Lubeck Island to the ground and threatened to give me 3 days to build a large heavy cannon. A super large heavy cannon. Hearing these words, Darren's eyes froze, and a sharp light flashed deep in his pupils. It seems that guy was indeed driven into a panic by the old man from the Warring States period. He frowned and murmured to himself, and then said. Is he injured? On the other side of the military phone bug, Doflamingo stood up hard with his bloody hands supporting his body, and said in a hoarse voice. That's right. He pondered for a moment and gritted his teeth. Godfather, what should I do? If that guy Bundy Waldo gets a super large heavy cannon, with his devil fruit ability. Then give it to him. Darren suddenly interrupted him with a smile. Give him everything he wants, munitions, weapons, heavy artillery, the more the better, as long as he can swallow it, all will be provided to him. Doflamingo was stunned when he heard this. Before he could ask further questions, Darren spoke again. Let's handle this matter like this, Dover. I'm very happy that you can take the initiative to contact me and inform me of this matter. A cold smile curled up at the corner of his mouth. You don't need to interfere with Bundy Waldo's matter. He wants arms, you provide him with arms. As for the loss of the Lubeck Island garrison, I will make him pay the price. Dover, you have to remember that when people live in this world, sudden insults often occur, which must be endured. Don't let hatred blind you. But I can assure you. The top officer of Beihai sneered and stood up slowly, reached out and took off the cloak of justice on the coat rack and draped it behind his back. There's no way Bundy Waldo will make it out of the North Sea alive. Late at night, the waves were rolling, the night sky was dark, and the stars were dim. On the territory of Germa 66, military fortresses were decorated with lights and feasting. Today is the christening day for the eldest daughter of the North Sea Germa Kingdom and the Vinsmoke family. In order to celebrate the birth of the royal family's eldest daughter, the king of the Kingdom of Germa and the commander of Germa 66, Vinsmoke Gaji, held a glorious and grand banquet party and invited many representatives from the Beihai member countries to attend. It's so boring. Are we sure we want to attend this so-called baptism day? The warship slowly docked, and Jia Ji stood on the deck and yawned. This sea is not just about fighting and killing, but also about worldly relations. Besides, the Kingdom of Germa is a long-term partner of our North Sea Navy. Darren said with a smile. Guillaume and Cake listened to his words and couldn't help but rolled their eyes. If they didn't know the inside story, others might actually believe Darren's nonsense. Admiral Darren, I am already waiting for your arrival in the banquet hall. At this time, a man who looked like a butler wearing a black tuxedo came forward and bowed to Darren, who was walking off the deck. King Gaji is so polite. It is an honor for me to witness the christening ceremony of Princess Vinsmoke. Darren smiled, his movements elegant and appropriate. Everyone followed the butler's footsteps and soon walked into Germa's banquet hall. The banquet hall was magnificent, with sparkling crystal chandeliers hanging from the dome. Waiters in suits shuttled back and forth among the crowd with trays in their hands, providing drinks and food to the guests attending the banquet. Jiaji noticed that among the guests present there were many famous figures in Beihai, bosses of chambers of commerce in rich costumes, nobles in gold and silver, royal representatives from various countries in the North Sea, dignitaries and ministers. If you listen carefully, you can faintly hear their whispers. They were discussing the operations of government, the profits and losses of commerce, shipping routes, land sales, titles of nobility, upper-class gossip, and changes in power. These are all prominent figures in the North Sea, and various resources, channels, favors, and transactions were finalized in such a seemingly casual banquet. Their words and deeds are enough to determine the situation and pulse of the entire Beihai, but as Darren and his party walked into the banquet hall, everyone who was drinking immediately stopped talking and moving, and couldn't help but turn their eyes to the black-haired Navy man walking at the front. The bustling banquet hall suddenly became quiet, so quiet that it was a bit scary. The deep silence pressed heavily on Jiaji's shoulders, making him swallow a gulp of saliva. Unlike other guests who were wearing dresses and robes, Darren was wearing a straight black suit as usual, with a black tie tied casually, and a wide white cape hanging behind him, with deep eyes, a high bridge of nose, and a neat back of the head. The whole person exudes a wild and elegant temperament that makes people unable to take their eyes away. Behind him were 20 powerful and solemn Navy elites, who walked grandly into the banquet hall. They gave the impression that they were not coming to attend a baptism ceremony, but rather a tiger patrolling their own territory. The man looked at him with respect and fear in his eyes, but the woman looked at him with unabashed covetousness and passion. "TCH, you know how to be cool. You're just here to witness the ceremony, okay?" Jiaji muttered sourly, but even he had to admit that Darren was indeed dazzling at this moment. Men want to be like him, women want to be in his shape. "Ha ha 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 ha, welcome Admiral Darren to Germa." At this time, a hearty laugh suddenly sounded, breaking the silence in the banquet hall. Mtlnovel, who was wearing royal-style clothing, walked out of the crowd with a smile and stretched out his hand towards Darren. "It is truly an honor for my little daughter to have Admiral Darren attend the christening ceremony." Darren smiled and held his hand. "How could I miss such an important occasion? Ask for everything and be grateful. My body is still recovering, I am still out of breath even after taking a few steps, and I can only maintain normal 2 updates." Chapter 79. Is there a sea tower stone? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Click, click, click. As the 2 people with the highest level of the banquet smiled and shook hands, the reporters present immediately raised their cameras and took photos one after another under the frequent flashes of flashlights. For the nobles, dignitaries, guests, and wealthy businessmen from various countries in the North Sea present, they naturally knew that the protagonists of this baptism ceremony were not them. Of course, Germa doesn't need to say much. This military power with all its people armed with soldiers possesses frightening military combat capabilities. It is full of aggression and has a majestic ambition to dominate the North Sea. It is the nightmare of many countries in the North Sea and has caused the royal family, dignitaries, and nobles of countless kingdoms can't sleep at night. In fact, if it were not for the previous mediation by the North Sea Navy, it is estimated that Mtlnovel would have dragged most of the North Sea into endless wars. As for the top officer of the North Sea Navy named Rogers Darren, the guests attending the ceremony were mostly in deep awe. Everyone knows that this young man, who is less than 20 years old, is the real talker in Beihai. The North Sea fleet under his command is invincible, and his personal strength is unfathomable. He can dominate the North Sea with one hand. "Admiral Darren, I heard that the situation in Beihai has changed a lot recently." Mtlnovel took a glass of wine from the waiter's hand and handed it to Darren, seemingly casually asking. Darren took the wine, took a sip, and said with a faint smile, "Oh. I wonder which aspect King Gaji is referring to." Mtlnovel frowned. As a scientist, he is not good at so-called political games, and he is even less interested. What he is good at is crushing his opponents with powerful science and military technology, and crushing all enemy countries with a hopelessly powerful army. He felt angry for no reason at Darren's roundabout political rhetoric. "Admiral Darren should know exactly what I mean." Mtlnovel took a deep breath and forced down the dissatisfaction in his heart. "The entire underground world of Beihai was turned upside down by your army, and in less than half a month, a kid named Doflamingo led his family members to forcefully invade the underground forces of Beihai. What I'm curious about is whether the rumors from the outside are true. Doflamingo, does he maintain a cooperative relationship with you? You know, the rise of the Don Quixote family has already affected the expansion of Germa 66. Darren shook the red wine glass gently, and the blood-red wine rippled along the wall of the glass. "King Gaji, you should be well aware of my attitude towards the so-called underground world." He smiled and said, "Under the premise of peace, as long as things are done according to the rules, I will turn a blind eye. Although Doflamingo is a little young, he is very capable, which I admire very much about him. As for Germa's expansion. He touched Vinsmoke Gage's glass. If I remember correctly, the North Sea Navy fleet is now Germa's largest business partner, isn't it? In the original plot, the rise of the Don Quixote family in the North Sea also hindered Germa's 66's plan to dominate. Vinsmoke Gage had no choice but to export the war to the outside world, exporting war throughout the world in the form of mercenaries to achieve the goal of expansion. Hearing the words of the Navy captain, Vinsmoke Gage fell silent. After a few seconds, a smile slowly appeared on his face. Indeed, stability and peace in the North Sea are the most important things. At this time, the housekeeper rang the bell gently, interrupting everyone's greetings. Now we invite the eldest daughter of the Vinsmoke family. The christening ceremony has officially begun. Everyone then stopped what they were doing and turned to look. I saw a gentle-looking, somewhat pale woman pushing a stroller, escorted by several German guards, slowly walking in from outside the hall. She was wearing a white royal dress. She did not wear complicated jewelry or decorations. She was lightly painted with pink and white. She had a delicate temperament and a slender figure, Princess Sora of the Vinsmoke royal family. This is Sanji's mother. She does seem to be a very gentle person. Such a thought flashed through Darren's mind. Admiral Darren, this is our first meeting. Hello. Princess Sora pushed the stroller towards Darren and gracefully showed her aristocratic courtesy. Darren gently held her hand, bowed slightly, kissed her hand with the etiquette of a knight, and said with a smile. I have always heard that Princess Sola is charming and charming. What I saw today is that she is indeed so. He looked at the pink baby girl in the stroller and said with a smile. Is this the eldest daughter of the Vinsmoke family, Reiju? Congratulations to both of you. Only on behalf of myself, I have prepared a small gift for Xiao Leijio. Please don't refuse it. As he spoke, he motioned to the flying squirrel, who quickly came over and handed a list to the butler behind Vinsmoke Gage. Although I couldn't see the specific items on the list clearly, the dense words on it, this meeting gift was obviously not thin. I am very grateful to Admiral Darren for his generosity. I hope the friendship between Germa and the Beihai Navy will last forever. Princess Sora smiled slightly and picked up the wine glass gracefully. Darren clinked a glass with her and drank it all. Soon the christening ceremony began. The pink-carved little Leijio was gently put into a wooden bucket filled with warm water by the butler, and was baptized in the presence of all the guests. The guests immediately applauded enthusiastically, and then the banquet officially began. Can I hug her? Darren looked at little Reiju lying in Princess Sora's arms and said with a smile. Sola hesitated for a moment and said softly. No problem at all. As she said this, she carefully picked up little Leijio and handed it to Darren. Darren took this cute baby with curly eyebrows and pink hair, biting his little finger in his arms, and felt a little dazed for a moment. This is Sanji's biological sister in the future toxic fan, Vinsmoke Reiju. He gently pinched Xiao Leijio's cheek, and he had already made a judgment in his mind. Vinsmoke Gage has indeed transformed his bloodline with blood factors. She will be the pride of Germa 66. Vinsmoke Gage came over at this time and said in a deep voice. Darren glanced at him and suddenly smiled. I believe so. He put little Leijio back on the soft crib and asked seemingly casually. King Gage, I want to discuss a new business with you. Darren arranged little Leijio's hair gently and covered her with the quilt. Germa 66, is there any sea tower stone? Ask for everything and be grateful. Chapter 80 I will lead the North Sea Fleet to fight. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 3 days passed quickly. General Waring states, everything is ready. In 3 hours, the target Bundy Waldo will land on an island in the waters north of Rubeck Island. This island belongs to no man's land. I recommend launching operations on this island. In the cabin of the warship, Waring States gradually wrinkled his eyebrows as he listened to the deep voice coming from the military phone bug in front of him. Darren, can you confirm the authenticity of the information? In the past 3 days, Bundy Waldo's whereabouts have been erratic. Even the government can't find the slightest trace of the ward pirates. If the intelligence is wrong and our navy's actions are exposed, we will do it for this. All efforts made in a single encirclement and suppression campaign will be in vain. As he spoke, Sengoku couldn't help but glance at Porcellino, who was picking his nails next to him. General of the Warring States period, please rest assured that there will be no mistakes. The source of intelligence information is reliable. As far as I know, Bundy Waldo purchased large quantities of smuggled arms through underground world channels in the North Sea. The specific transaction place is the target island. Darren's steady and powerful voice came from the phone bug. Hearing Darren's confident words, a smile slowly appeared on Sengua's face. Very good, I really saw the right person. He pondered for a moment. What suggestions do you have for the operation to round up Bundy Waldo? Darren pretended to hesitate and said. General Sengoku, I'm just a colonel in my headquarters. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for me to make military suggestions for a military operation to encircle and suppress a big pirate like Bundy Waldo, right? That when Warring States heard this, he laughed angrily and cursed. You kid, don't pretend to be there for me. If you have any ideas, please speak up quickly. After the operation is successful, you will be indispensable for the credit. Besides, I have already submitted your application for promotion. As long as it passes the procedural inquiry and review, a brigadier general of the headquarters is already qualified to participate in this level of military operations. Sengoku was no fool. As a person recognized as a wise general in the Navy, his political skills and military strategies are definitely among the best in this sea. Because of the Draconian Shield Saint incident, the ward pirates became more cautious and troublesome, including the intelligence network of the Navy and the World Government CP department. Bundy Waldo's whereabouts could not be found. I even used a lot of personal connections to communicate with the political leaders of the major kingdoms in Beihai, trying to find clues about Bundy Waldo, but in the end all failed. However, under such circumstances, Darren, the North Sea Admiral, directly provided information down to the precise time and location in less than 2 days. This incident itself speaks volumes. Thinking like this, an extremely absurd idea suddenly came to Warring States' mind. Could it be? Darren. Did you arrange this arms deal? Warring States' expression suddenly became stern and he asked in a deep voice. The phone bug was silent for a second, and then Admiral Beihai's smiling voice slowly came out. The Warring States General's vision and resourcefulness are indeed astonishing. I can't hide anything from you. Yes, this business was arranged by me. Bundy Waldo has been frantically recruiting troops, purchasing arms, and building a huge cannon of staggering scale in the past few days, trying to destroy the troops led by you, the Warring States General. Boom! Sengoku punched the desk in front of him hard, his face so gloomy that it seemed like water was dripping from his face. Damn Bundy Waldo! Is he trying to blow away Malavando? As an admiral who had fought against Bundy Waldo many times, Sengoku knew the terrifying power of the former's Momo fruit better than anyone else. If he really gets a large-scale heavy artillery, not to mention the naval force he leads, I am afraid that with Bundy Waldo's crazy, violent, and arrogant character, he may really dare to bomb the Navy headquarters Mtlnovel with one shot. Everything is turned upside down. But since he knew this information in advance, he had enough time to deal with it. Thinking of this, Warring States' anxious heart at that moment calmed down a little. You didn't give him that heavy cannon, did you? Darren. Well, I still believe you, little boy. You shouldn't do such a stupid thing. No, Warring States General. I built him a cannon of unprecedented scale. Darren said suddenly. Warring States period, 1 second later. What did you say? Sengua collapsed from his seat, and his thunderous roar almost shook the cabin lid off. The sound was so loud that Porcellino couldn't help but pick his ears. Are you crazy? Warring States gritted his teeth and looked at the calm look of Darren simulated by the phone bug, with 2 lines of smoke blowing out from his nostrils. General Warring States period, you don't have to worry. I did this for a reason. Darren's salty voice came out. This guy Bundy Waldo looks crazy, but he's actually a very difficult guy to deal with. Although he has ambitions to destroy the world, he is definitely not a reckless and arrogant fool. If there are not enough benefits, it may be difficult to lure him out and kill him in one fell swoop. If he hadn't gotten this heavy cannon in his hands, he wouldn't have rashly started a war with our navy, especially if he was already injured. This time we trapped him in the North Sea. This is the best opportunity and must not be missed. Otherwise, once he has the opportunity to escape to the Great Channel or even the New World, it will be several or even dozens of times more difficult for us to defeat him in the future than it is now. Listening to Darren's well-founded analysis, Zhangguo's eyebrows were still tightly knitted. He raised his hand and pinched his temples and said, "But Darren boy, your approach is too risky." "No, Warring States General, please believe me. Admiral Beihai's voice has a convincing bearing. Since I dare to hand over that heavy cannon to Bundy Waldo, I naturally have the confidence to deal with him. As for what you just said, about this mission, I have an immature idea." Darren paused for a second and said word by word, "I hope this operation will be handed over to me. I will lead the North Sea Fleet, in the battle." It was too difficult to recover after Yang Kong, with chest tightness and asthma, so the update was delayed, sorry.